Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us again on Aspiration, Inspiration with me, Jason George, where, as always, we aspire to inspire before we expire. And today our guest is the formidable, the beautiful, the businesswoman, the mother. You have so many roles, Jo-Ann Strauss. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jo-Ann.
Jason, thanks very much for having me. I mean, when I heard about this platform and I went and I checked you out, I was like, firstly, big ups to you. Well done on all your achievements thus far. So, yeah, very excited to be and share a bit.
Thank you so much, Jo-Ann. No problem. Jo-Ann, so a lot of people know you as, the former Miss South Africa top billing host. You were on Pasella at for some time, and now you are running multiple businesses. And I mean, on social media also, I have a large following. Where did it all start for you, Jo-Ann? Where does it all start?
For me, I think it all started. I grew up in Blackheath. My parents are from Elsie's River and Ravensmead. And my parents were always very inspiring and very, very adamant that we always thought out of the box and that we realized that the world was our oyster, that you always dreamed bigger than you thought you were capable of, and they pushed. When I would come home with 90%, my dad would go, "Where's the other 10%?" So it was never really rest on your laurels. It was you given an opportunity. So when my parents managed to put together enough money to send us to the best possible school they could at that point in time, if you didn't present A's and if you weren't part of every society and club and sports extramural you could do, then they were like, no, then you just go to the other school. If you're not putting in your work, then you're out. So yeah. I think for me, a lot of where I am is because of my parents.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds a little bit like my parents. I mean, how are you not satisfied with the 90%? I'm getting A's.
And that's the whole thing. It's like you have to be cruel to be kind, because now I look back and I understand that complacency isn't anybody's friend.
Yeah.
So once you start believing you're the bee's knees, then it's already done. Once you start believing the hype that others might make about you. Yeah. My dad always said you must handle the praise and the criticism with the same energy. Yeah. So he was very, very adamant that you don't rest on your laurels.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about you mentioned earlier that they encouraged you to dream and they created that environment for you. I mean, what was your dream as growing up in Blackheath and then moving up? What was your dream, and do you feel like you've achieved that dream that you set out for yourself?
My dream was to be king. So I don't know. I don't know. It was a funny thing always, because I never wanted to be a princess, because I thought it was always like the princess always had to marry the guy who then comes and saves her from a life of, Yeah. And I always there were so many different dreams. I think my biggest dream at a point was to become a medical doctor. And so my parents always laugh because I married a doctor. So they say I'm sort of living my dream vicariously through him. So he comes home and he tells me about the cases and I'm like, oh, and what if you do this and blah, blah, blah. So I'm very grateful that I get to have some exposure to things from his side. But my dream was always to travel the world, to learn, and to then share knowledge. I think for me, the big thing is my dad always said to me that success without being able to help others is a very empty success.
Indeed, yeah.
And he was also, I mean, it was an interesting thing as a child from having such a very, with my parents being very pro-education and my dad was always pushing for me to do well at school, etc. It was very hard for him to understand when I was hosting television and traveling the world. And he was like, what do you actually do for a living? How's this contributing? But look, my dad, I love him to bits. I just chatted to him now. We're very close. And I think a lot of, he jokes with me and he says he knows he was very hard on me as a child, but a lot of that actually helped me to get to where I am.
Yes, no, definitely. And I mean, you do so many things, so many great things. And I can also imagine, like, with your social media and that also be booming, and is your businesses. How do you, and now you are mom, you're a mom of 3 as well. There's one on the way. How do you manage those roles?
You know, Jason, it's an interesting thing. I think for me, my mom was always the superwoman. So she always just told us, you get on with it. You don't complain, you get on with it. You know, what you think is like a terrible day is actually a paradise of a day for somebody else. And she always taught us to be grateful. And so I'm grateful that I have the energy to do what I do. I'm grateful that I have the health and that I have the support structure. Sadly, my mom's not able to help out as much as she would have wanted to. But my dad is amazing. Obviously, it's now the time of COVID, so it's not really in anybody's interest to have them to come and help out. But I've got an amazing support system. My husband is awesome. He understands that as a man, when you look after your own children, you're not babysitting, you're just being a father. So he understands that it's half-half. And yeah, there are good days and there are bad days. So I'm one of the few people who suffers from extreme morning sickness. And yeah, sometimes you just kyk noord, gaan voort. You just when you go.
I mean, that's very important, particularly for someone managing a career like yours. You know, it's very high profile, and I can imagine it comes with a lot of stress. You know, how important is mental well-being for someone that's doing, you know, what you are doing? And I mean, I think you may have touched on it, but you know, what advice do you have for someone that may be pursuing a career, you know, something similar to what you are, in terms of the stresses that you have to face and how to overcome that? Anything you have to say on that?
I think for me, the big thing that I've realized as I've gotten older, and I mean, I've been in this industry now for half my life, in the media and entertainment space. I think for me, the big thing is that you also realize that a person is a person through others. So you treat everybody with respect, and that then hopefully is reciprocated. But I've also learned that you can't be everything to everyone, and that you've also got to be careful who you surround yourself with. Once you say yes to everyone and to everything, you say no to yourself in a lot of aspects as well. So as much as I believe in going out there and grabbing opportunities, and yeah, I think the word opportunist is has such negative connotations, but I'm an opportunist. You know, I love, it was a business philosopher, Jim Rohn, who said, opportunity dances with those already on the dance floor. And I've always got my dance shoes on. I'm always ready for the dance floor. So, but I'm a lot more conscious of my time. I'm protective of my time. I aim to be as punctual as possible. The big thing is that the biggest gift that one has is time. And I always say that time is more valuable than money. You can always get more money, but you can never get more time. And so I'm very careful who I spend my time with or share my time with, especially because having 4 kids, doing what I do, I want to make sure that I've got enough energy for those who are the most important in my life, instead of expending my energy on those who actually just are feeding off it.
Yeah. And I mean, with that, thank you so much for, you know, creating the bit of time for us to chat today. And, you know,
but what you're doing is so valuable. And that's the thing, is that I'm very excited to have the time to be on here. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So Jo-Ann, getting into we talk about your Miss South Africa journey. You won the pageant at a very young age. I mean, you were 19 years old. And I mean, you say that you've dedicated over half of your life to the industry. I mean, what did that moment do for you and your family and your career?
I think, you know, for me, it was sort of a moment of affirmation. It was a moment of, I would say, triumph for me and my community. Blackheath, where I grew up, is an incredible community. Auntie Bale lives opposite the road. You know, she and, you know, I would go aftercare at her house every day, and my mom would pack in extra sandwiches. And you're raised by your community. You know, you go borrow by Mrs. Tom, Bicky Suiker, Bicky, you know, when you're in the middle of making something and you're like, oh, I didn't get a chance to go to Babi. So I grew up in a very close-knit community. And I think for me, hopefully, my win was a win for the community. And they celebrated me that way. I mean, Jason, it was amazing. I had my Miss Essay time, or my Miss Essay party that night that I won. But then a few weeks later, I came home to Blackheath, and my community arranged a carriage and I think some donkeys or horses, I can't remember now. We went through the streets. Then we had a party community hall. My Oma and Opa were there, the ones who are surviving then at that point. And it was just such a Oscar het gewen, you know. So I think hopefully my win was a community win in that sense, because I was celebrated by the people who had raised me.
Yeah.
And it was just, I hope, a chance to say that it's possible for anyone, you know. My parents invested love and care and energy, and I never say I didn't grow up privileged. I always say I grew up with the greatest privilege, having two parents who loved us and who gave us everything they could. And even in the times that both of them were unemployed and we were eating pilchards out of tins on government loaf and, you know, we had love and we shared and we prayed and we said thank you. And they taught us gratitude and they taught us humility. And for me, I think that's why I say I grew up with great privilege.
It's so incredible.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, there's something about our communities, you know, and when people achieve things and how, you know, people will hype you up and how uplifting and supporting. Yeah, it's really amazing. And then I'm claim. Yeah, nee, that's also kind. That's also kind.
Yeah, I know. It's changed to say any but I know. I try to. Yes. And that's the thing. I'm a product of my community. Yeah. You know. I mean,
there's always that auntie that's gonna be. Yeah, get for your pak gegee. You know, I used to raise you. You know, you grew up in front of.
Yes. And when the wedding invitations go out and I didn't invite the whole, ooh, girl, vegan is Jack.
Oh, yeah, no, classic. And Jo-Ann, the industries that you operate in, you know, what is it like being from a colored community or being a person of color, female of color, you know, in operating in the industries that you operate in? What is that experience?
You know, for me, it's such a contentious thing, because I want to say that my dad always said to us that you succeed and your success mustn't be linked to the color of your skin. And by that, I'm not saying that race is not important. I'm saying that for me, I'm very passionate about the fact that merit is the one thing that one is judged on. And of course, you know, it's a contentious issue because some people are like, yeah, but we didn't have the same upbringing or we didn't have the same opportunity. But we all have the same brain capacity. We all have the same abilities. And when it comes to opportunities, we might not have the same opportunities, but sometimes having to achieve despite circumstances and opportunities actually makes you a stronger person and a stronger candidate. So have I had a different experience being a woman of color? Yes, of course I have, but I think those have all strengthened my resolve and strengthened my determination to succeed. I had an interesting, and I'll discuss it here, but I had an interesting, Twitter, which is very angry. Twitter went on a full-on rampage because I'd once said that there's a beautiful African proverb that says, it's not what you call me, but what I answer to that counts in terms of racism. Yeah. And for me, my response to racism has always been that I think of the person who's being racist towards me as smaller, or their brain is smaller, that they would think something so silly. And so it's not a point of where I go, oh, I'm going to hurt you. It's like, okay, my success is my revenge, not being provoked. I won't be provoked by an idiot, you know. So for me, that's always been my thing, is that I work hard. Sometimes I'll have to work harder than others, and sometimes also, I mean, there's different types of prejudice and privilege. I have privilege because I've been on television. People do business with people they know, so it's easier for me to get a meeting with somebody. But once I'm in that room and once I'm having my time to pitch, I've got to then convince them that I'm not just a beauty queen puppy. So then I've got to overcome that prejudice, but the privilege got me in there. So there's privilege and prejudice, same side or different sides of the same coin. And you've just got to understand how to use every opportunity. And I suppose, Jason, that brings me back to the whole thing of opportunity.
Yeah.
When it presents itself, you use what you have. So whether it means that I know that the person's grandma maybe watched Top Billing and wants an autograph, how old school is that? And that's going to get me in the door. But once I'm in the door, it's my chance to shine. And I've got to bring it. And they always laugh at me. I mean, I'm a wolf, Macy, you know, so I research, I do my work, I do my due diligence, and I don't like asking questions that I don't already anticipate an answer to. So I leave enough space for surprise and for spontaneity, but I've done my research to the point that I know, okay, you know, does this person have issues? I can deal with it. You know, I've researched sort of what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the, I don't know if you've watched Drumline, the second one, and there's a.
Is it a series or I haven't even watched Game of Thrones or what's Drumline?
It's a movie about you know, bands and you know, there are these.
Yes, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Dick Cannon is in the first one, and then I think he comes back in the second one, but as a different character. But you know, there are two brothers that are fighting, and the one brother was in the first one, but then in the second one, you know, there are two brothers that are fighting, and then you know, the one brother who's now sort of the bad guy tells the you know, the good guy that, you know, there's no such thing as luck. You know, luck is when opportunity meets preparation, and that just, you know, it just emanates from your life. It's evident, you know, that yes, the opportunity will present itself, but if you are not prepared,
ready
for those, I mean, that's why you always have to be prepared. And I also love the quote about, you know, always having your dancing shoes on, so because
I'll send it to you. Opportunity dances with those already on the dance floor. This is, you know, Jason, this is my thing. Like even now, I'm actually working with an online education company, and I'm going to be doing a mentorship for 50 women.
Yes, I saw that.
I'm giving them, and for me, it's very important. You know, I don't believe in handouts. I'm not a millennial, so I don't know how to switch these notifications off.
That would be fine.
But when it comes to working hard, there's working harder, there's working smarter. I think it's important to also understand that a lot of people work hard, but if you're not actively seeking for the upside, and you're not actively seeking for, okay, but how's this going to drive me closer to my goal?
Yes.
You're going to be running in a little hamster wheel. My goal's always been balance in life. I think it was for me, it's one of those things that I value a good relationship as much as I value a good return on an investment. You know, I value networking, and so when it comes to relationships and networks, they've got to be mutually beneficial. There's got to be reciprocity. It's got to be so for me, it's been one of those things that I'm also very conscious of the fact that as you progress in life, it mustn't be at the expense of others. And that, again, success not shared is a very empty one.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And I think that's an important message, you know, I mean, especially in the world that we live in now, and I mean, opportunities for young people in particular that I'm thinking about now, and, you know, managing your personal brand and networking with people, you know, using things like social media, which can be a very powerful tool. And I think a lot of the times we underestimate, you know, the power of social media, and we post things and then it comes out later and it ruins certain opportunities for you. And I mean, that's a very important lesson in preserving those, creating those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think also what I like about the day and age now is that there's the democracy of media. Because before, you'd have to get onto a specific TV show, or if you had a certain connection, you could be able to say things or grow your celebrity. But now, if you're good and you work hard at what you do, and you figure out the right ways to get your content out there, there's a way for you to create your own audience. And not everybody has to go viral. Not everybody has to have millions of followers. But if you have a good audience and you have a good community, because I suppose social media also creates communities. If you create a good community, you are able to make a difference. You know, there's ego versus productivity. And a lot of times I think with social media as well, people get caught up in the amount of likes or the amount of followers. And so many people want to be influencers now and content creators. And the sad thing for me is, as women, the more clothing you take off, the more likes you get, you know. So it's an interesting thing. It's a double-edged sword. But I think if you carefully consider it and you use it in the right way, it can be a good business, but it can also be a good way to create a meaningful community that helps people to have positive change in their lives.
Definitely. I agree 100%. Jo-Ann, it's Women's Month, and you know, we're celebrating the women that, you know, fought for freedom of others in our country, and it's a very important month or period that we're going into. I mean, I think we should celebrate women every day, you know, because of the amazing things that, you know, that they do and that they've sacrificed. But for you, you know, as a being who you are to other women out there, how important? Firstly, you know, what's it like being a woman for you currently in South Africa, and how important is it that we empower, you know, other women, you know, moving forward?
Jason, I think it's an interesting one because in terms of Women's Month and in terms of all the conversations that we have, I get very worried when it feels like an us versus them trajectory with the, sorry man, sometimes my accent fades me. Very happy. No, all those years of pretending to be one of the top billing presenters, you know, sometimes I have to go like, but I think for me, it's important that men and women understand that we're different, but that doesn't make one superior to the other. So equality is a good conversation, and it's a good topic, and it's a good aim. But I think it's also very important that we get to the point where there's a lot of anger in these conversations. There's a lot of people not striving to understand. For me also, as a woman who is able to work and have children, unfortunately, I'm not the norm. And at the end of the day, only women have a womb. You know, only women are able to have children. So it's an interesting conversation I've been having actually with quite a couple of my friends, and it is one of those things that when we teach women that you can achieve everything in life, you can, but a lot of things are at the expense of something else. And so you also have to be very cognizant of the fact that there's certain times and that success, you've got to define success for you. And to be very careful there again, because of the advent of social media, and because everybody's so accessible, everybody has an opinion. A lot of people have unsubstantiated opinions, but they've got a loud voice because they've got lots of followers, so they're able to believe. When it comes to deciding what success means for you and what equality means for you, if you're able to substantiate that and you've done your research, you know what you stand for, then you should be able to do that in a safe space. And with Women's Day and Women's Month, I mean, it would be a great thing if we no longer had to celebrate these things because women were regarded as equals. So it's probably a contentious thing to say, but I wish we didn't have to have Women's Day and Women's Month.
I think that's very powerful. That's
so you know, because by doing it, we're saying, oh, we're not there yet, and we're not. As a society, we're not. But yeah, I'm very. I've got my son is the oldest child. I've got 3, you know, the other ones in here. I've got 3 young women who I'm going to be raising, and that to me is very important. Is that I teach my son to respect and to aspire to the same things as I teach my daughters. You know, flawless. I mean, the Nigerian poet, bless her heart, obviously she was overshadowed by Beyonce using the words, but we teach our girls to aspire to marriage, but we don't teach our boys. And that to me is one of those things that women are taught to be competitive amongst each other.
Yeah.
I come from a beauty pageant world. Come on, you know. I didn't enter Miss South Africa for world peace. I entered it for a car, to travel the world and to yeah, of course I paraded around in a bikini and proclaimed world peace, but that's sometimes a necessary, not evil, but a part of the process. We all have our different journeys, and again, as long as it's not hurting, it's not at the expense of somebody else, we get to where we need to get.
Yes.
Yeah, for me, it is an important thing that, especially now, as we celebrate the rights we have as women, we also take cognizance of the fact that hopefully in a couple of years' time, our daughters say to us, why did we have to celebrate Women's Day? We're all equal.
Yeah.
Not the same. We're not the same, but we're equal.
Very, very powerful. Very, very. Yeah, I'm so inspired by this. And I mean, as a male, you know, hearing things like these, I mean, you know, it gives me such a different perspective to these things as well, to think about it, you know. And I think a lot of the times as males, we tend not to want to educate ourselves about these things. I mean, because I think it's probably also just related to the privilege that we already enjoy, and we just couldn't be bothered, you know. But I think it's something to definitely think about and consider how we, you know, think about these things, and our approach to these issues.
I think for me, that's also because I spend a lot of time hosting events for Women's Days and doing talks. And for me, it's also disappointing when it's only women in the audience, because we shouldn't be speaking to each other and having the conversation amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not an us against them thing. So when the Women's Day things happen and the guys are like, oh, this is a great time for us now to just go have tea in the no, we should all no.
Yeah.
No, it's a conversation for all of us to be having, because it's not us against them, it's us together.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with you. And then last few questions, Jo-Ann. Just quickly about your time at Top Billing and you know, all of the shows that you've hosted and being an international MC. You work for some of the biggest brands in the world. You work with some of the biggest names. In terms of people who you've worked with or people that you've interviewed, which of those stood out for you in terms of interviews? Which interview stood out for you and why? And maybe in terms of the brands that you work with, you know, I don't want to say favorite, but you know, which ones are really important to you and why?
I think from the people that I've interviewed, I really enjoyed interviewing Charlize Theron or Tron or whatever she is. I really like the fact that she is, I mean, she's a very influential, powerful woman who uses her influence to do good. I don't know if you saw, there was an amazing series she did on Netflix with some of these guys who dice, and there was a girl in a pink BMW that she had on who did some drag racing and who was spinning in Joburg with the box beamers.
I haven't checked it out yet. I should probably check it out. Yeah.
I mean, she uses her celebrity to really impact the entertainment industry in an interesting way, and she empowers others. And I'll never forget, I interviewed her on my birthday in Berlin. Nice. And she actually sang happy birthday to me in Afrikaans, and you know, she really appreciated that I'd done my research. So when I asked her like a question about when she was in ballet class and she pretended to be a princess, she was like, we gelled, you know, and we could have a good chat. George Clooney, I really enjoyed discussing politics with him, you know. Of course he's good looking, and of course he's this incredible man. I really like the fact that he's married a woman who's probably more powerful and influential than him, Amal. So he's not intimidated by strong women. I think it takes a very strong man to not be intimidated by a strong woman. And then when it comes to brands that I love working with, I think I've been very, very lucky to work with BMW. It's so funny because I remember when we used to, I don't know if you ever went to illegal street racing. Do you know what it is when people dice, right?
The one in...
You can't say that.
No.
You can't say that. You're a lawyer. But I just remember watching and thinking, wow, you know, check out these cool cars, and they'd be spinning, and I'd be like, whoa. My mom actually went with us. We went to the pitch. It was called in Blackheath. But you know, Gatsby, you'd like chill there, like cup of dice. It was so lekker. But anyway, so for me, I think I've been very fortunate to work with brands also who I work with well here in South Africa, and then who have booked me internationally. I hosted conferences with Condé Nast, with Vogue, worked with Vogue editors across the world, and you know, I modeled with Naomi Campbell and Kate Moss, and I've really, Jason, I'm so blessed. But I think I'll never forget, I was at a party in, okay, I'm not name dropping, but I was at a party in Europe. And I remember phoning my parents at like 3 a.m. to just say, thank you for raising me the way that they did. Because my morals and my values, I never valued who I was based on money. And they installed very strict morals and values. I mean, my mom would still say, they're going to bring me back to the ground, like, wie dank JSJ. You know, so my parents, in that sense, are just incredible. So, very, very lucky to grow up with
sharing that. I mean, my mom usually still tells me, "Can you nog steeds 'n pakkie? I can still give you hiding."
Totally. So this is
probably
the whole thing. It's not my kid, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And now I'm still the baby, so that makes things worse. Jo-Ann, yeah. And talk to us a bit about, you know, if you, I mean, you've already spoken about people that you've interviewed. If you could interview someone now, you know, dead or alive, who would you interview and why?
If I could have an off-the-record conversation with Cyril, Uncle Cyril Ramaphosa, I would love to just know what he honestly feels without pressure from anyone. I do not envy his position at this point in time. He's damned if he does, and he's damned if he doesn't. So for me, if that were an unbroadcast interview off the record, I would love to speak to him. Donald Trump. But I don't think I'd get any sense out of that in any case. So
I can understand. I can truly understand. But
I met him when he owned Miss Universe, and I took part in Miss Universe in Puerto Rico. And he chose 10 of the finalists to go for dinner with us. And one of the other ladies brought me as her +1. What an interesting character. I can't believe he's president of, anyway.
Yeah, one of those things that people that said would never happen, and then it happened. Like, okay.
Life.
Yeah. And then a bit more of a general question in terms of when you look back over your career, and I mean where you are heading as well. All of your experiences and knowledge that you've acquired over the years. Is there anything, if you could go back, is there anything that you would do differently? You know, and what would that be, and why, if anything?
Good question. Of course, there are things that you think you would do differently, or they would maybe accelerate your path. But I think, if I'm honest with myself, the way things have happened and the pace, I wouldn't have learned the lessons that I did. And all of those helped me to also prepare for bigger lessons maybe along the way. So I don't really have regrets. I mean, I think when it comes to regrets, I probably regret not spending more time with certain people, which probably brings me back to the point again that time is our most valuable asset.
Yes.
But I also, there's small little things I regret, but in the end, it all kind of brings me to the same point that I had to go through that to get to where I am. And I think if you regret, then you're not able to just appreciate.
And last question. I mean, and I'll it's the last two, but I'll try and combine them. So you know, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And you know, what is your for someone that wants to follow into your footsteps? Someone, the little girl or the boy sitting at home, or guy or girl that's watching this and have certain dreams and aspirations. What is your message of hope and inspiration to them? And you know, if they wanted to follow in your footsteps, what advice do you have for someone like that?
Somebody who wanted to follow in my footsteps, advice, I'd say dream bigger, because I think it's important to have people that you look up to and that you aspire to, but I think it's also important that you walk your own path, that you follow your own journey, and every journey happens at a different time. So the opportunities that, for example, social media presented me might not be the same for somebody now, or what the opportunities that television presented, or perhaps at the time that you're doing your journey, beauty pageants are not the thing anymore, or you know. So it's, I think when it comes to following in footsteps, I think it's a very precarious one. I think it's good to be inspired by different people and then to put together your own idea of what success is. And that to me is very important, especially because we live in a time where people are so easily influenced. There's people haven't, the world's not very quiet anymore. There's constant information. I think in terms of, I think we're overstimulated as people, and not necessarily in the right way. So for me, it's very important to learn to be quiet, and to learn to celebrate being alone or being quiet, and to put away the technology, to switch off the Wi-Fi, and to actually think, what do I think, and not what do all the millions of voices say that are trending and that are shouting the loudest, but not necessarily shouting with understanding. And so for me, when it comes to advising people, I love telling, or I'll share my story, but my story, my circumstances are different to the next person's circumstances. And so maybe there are elements of my journey that can help, but I think it's very important that one understands the context and one makes sure that you understand what your personal understanding is of success. It doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. And I like your little slogan there in the back, be the best version of you. My mom, bless her heart, she would always say, don't just be yourself, be your best self. And so I'm always striving to be the best version of myself. I think you have to constantly be learning, constantly be evolving, constantly educating yourself. Your success is your responsibility. There's another one that I love. We actually learned it on like school camp. It's up to me. And that to me is a very big thing, is that I don't feel entitled to anything. Nobody owes me anything. If I want to succeed, it's up to me. And so once I take that responsibility, and once I understand that responsibility, I understand that it's up to me to do the work. It's up to me to nurture the relationships that might enable that. And it's up to me to make sure that when it comes to networking with people, that the people that I want to network with are equally interested in working with me, because they know that I've got a good work ethic. So, and making sure that you also are bringing your part, so that you're not just, I don't believe in handouts.
No, thank you so much, Jo-Ann, and thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're watching this video and you've been inspired by Jo-Ann's words, please reach out to us. At Aspiration Inspiration, we always aspire to inspire before we expire. Jo-Ann, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I like that whole expire thing. I'm like, I'm not going to expire soon, hopefully. So, thank you very, very much, and all the best. And good luck with the rest of your journey.
Thank you.